The red and blue lights cut through the rain like knives. On the side of a nearly empty city street, a black sedan sat motionless, its engine ticking softly as steam rose from the hood. A police cruiser idled behind it, door open, rain soaking the pavement between them. Officer Daniel Mercer stood stiff, one hand resting near his belt, eyes locked on the man beside the car. Step away from the vehicle. Slowly. The man complied without protest. He was black, mid-40s, wearing a charcoal coat and wire-rimmed glasses now speckled with rain. His hands were raised, calm but tired, not afraid, just weary. "My name is Elijah Carter," he said evenly. "This is my car." Daniel didn't respond. He'd heard that line before, too many times. The rain grew heavier. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, then faded. And in that quiet stretch of asphalt, a single accusation hovered in the air, heavy as the storm itself. Before we go any further, take a second with me. Where are you watching from right now? Different streets, different lives, yet somehow, the same stories find us all. Drop your city in the comments and let's feel how far this moment travels. Daniel Mercer hadn't planned for his shift to end like this. It started with a radio call, possible stolen vehicle, black sedan, erratic driving. When he spotted the car, his pulse kicked up the way it always did. Training took over. Procedure, control, authority. What he hadn't expected was the man's composure. Most suspects argued. Some shouted. Some trembled. Elijah Carter did neither. He followed every command with deliberate care, like someone used to being measured, weighed, misunderstood. "License and registration," Daniel said. Elijah nodded. "They're in my jacket pocket. May I reach for them?" Daniel hesitated. A flicker of something crossed his face. Caution, maybe fear, before he nodded sharply. Slowly, Elijah produced the documents. Daniel glanced down. The name matched the plates. The address was upscale. Clean record. Still, Daniel didn't relax. "Where are you coming from tonight?" he asked. "The courthouse," Elijah replied. "Late session." Daniel's brow tightened. "What do you do there?" The pause. "Just a beat too long." "I work there," Elijah said. Daniel exhaled through his nose. "That's not an answer." Rain slid down Elijah's glasses. He didn't wipe it away. "I'm a judge." Daniel almost laughed. Almost. Instead, his jaw hardened. "Sir, step back to the curb." Something in Elijah's eyes shifted then. Not anger, not fear, but recognition. Like he'd been here before. Like he already knew how this would go. As Daniel moved to the cruiser to run the plates again, his chest buzzed with unease. The paperwork didn't lie, but instinct, warped by years on the job, whispered something else. Too calm, too polished, too good at this. From the curb, Elijah watched Daniel's back. The rain soaked through his coat, seeping cold into his shoulders. He thought of his mother's voice, decades ago, telling him to keep his hands visible, to speak softly, to survive moments like this. Daniel returned, radio crackling at his shoulder. "Step closer," he ordered. Elijah did. "If this is really your vehicle," Daniel said, "why was it flagged?" "Because I drive a car people don't expect me to own," Elijah replied quietly. The words landed harder than any insult. Daniel stiffened. "Watch your tone." "I am," Elijah said, "every day." A gust of wind rattled nearby trash cans. The city felt like it was holding its breath. Daniel's partner hadn't arrived yet. Protocol said wait. His pride said act. He gestured toward the cruiser. "Turn around." Elijah didn't move. "Officer," he said, voice steady but edged with something deeper now, "before you do this, please, just check the internal directory. My name." Daniel hesitated again. The hesitation annoyed him. "Turn around," he repeated. Elijah slowly complied, placing his hands behind his back, not in resistance, but in resignation. And as Daniel reached for the cuffs, something inside him twisted. Because for the first time since the stop began, Elijah looked human, not composed, not distant, just tired. If you were standing there in the rain, watching this unfold, What would you have done?
Officer, you
Would
have
you have
to
trusted
listen.
your
This is a
badge
mistake.
or your
Sir,
conscience?
step away from the vehicle
Tell
now.
me honestly in the
I'm telling you, I
comments.
didn't do anything.
And if this
Stop right
moment
there and
already
state your
weighs on your
business. I'm
chest,
just passing
tap
through. What's
like.
the issue here?
Sometimes
This is a
that's the
restricted
only
area.
way to
Hands where
say
I can
this
see them.
matters. Daniel's fingers brushed cold metal, and somewhere deep inside him, a quiet doubt began to speak, just as the situation crossed a line neither man could take back. The cuffs clicked open. The cuffs didn't close. They hovered there, cold, open, uncertain, inches from Elijah's wrists. Daniel's radio crackled. Unit 12, status check.
Sir, you need
Daniel
to step away from the
swallowed.
vehicle now.
Stand
I have
by.
every right to be
He
here. You
stared
can't
at
do
Elijah's
this.
hands. They were steady,
You need to step
no
back
shaking,
now.
no
I'm within
sudden
my
movement,
rights to be here.
just stillness, the kind that came from long
Officer, you have
practice,
to listen.
the
This is a
kind
mistake.
learned,
Sir,
not
step away
inherited.
from the vehicle now.
Why didn't you say
I'm
what
telling
kind
you, I
of
didn't do
judge?
anything. Stop
Daniel
right there and
asked,
state your
lowering his
business.
voice.
I'm just passing through.
Elijah
What's the
didn't
issue
turn
here?
around,
This is a restricted
because it
area.
never
Hands where I can
helps,
see them.
he said. It only changes how people look at me after they've already decided who I am. Daniel felt that twist again. Annoyance mixed with something he didn't want to name. He stepped back, unclipping the cuffs from the air. Turn around. Face me. Elijah did. Rain traced lines down his face like quiet tears he refused to claim. Daniel cleared his throat.
Sir, you need
You
to
said
step
you were
away
at the
from vehicle
courthouse.
now. I have
What
every
case?
right to be here. You can't
Elijah
do this.
hesitated, not from fear this
You
time,
need to
but
step
from
back
choice.
now.
A
I'm within my
constitutional
rights to be
appeal,
here.
he said. Long day.
Officer,
Daniel
you have to
nodded
listen.
slowly,
This is a mistake.
pretending he
Sir,
understood.
Step away from the vehicle
He didn't.
now. I'm
Not
telling you,
really.
I didn't do anything.
But something about
Stop
the way
right there and
Elijah
state
said
your
it,
business.
no
I'm just passing
pride,
through. What's
no
the issue here?
defense,
This is a
unsettled
restricted
him.
area. Hands where I can see them.
Dispatch, Daniel said into the radio. Run a deeper ID check. Full name, Elijah Carter. The seconds stretched. Rain drummed harder. A car passed in the distance, its headlights briefly illuminating the scene like a flash of judgment, then gone. While they waited, silence grew
You
heavy.
need to step back
Elijah
right now. I
finally
have
spoke.
rights, officer. This
Do
is
you know why
unnecessary.
I didn't argue with you? Daniel
Sir, you
didn't
need to step
answer.
away from the vehicle
Because
now. I
arguing
have
gets
every
people
right to
hurt,
be here. You
Elijah
can't do
continued.
this.
I learned that early.
You need to step
Daniel
back
shifted
now.
his weight.
I'm within my
From
rights
where?
to be here.
Elijah looked past him, to the street
Officer,
behind the
you have to
cruiser.
listen. This is a
From my
mistake.
father.
Sir, step
He was
away
a
from the
public
vehicle now.
defender.
I'm telling you, I
Watched him
didn't
get
do
shoved
anything.
against
Stop
walls
right
for
there and
asking
state your
questions.
business. I'm just
Watched
passing
my
through. What's
mother
the issue
rehearse
here?
phone
This is a
calls in
restricted
case he
area.
didn't come
Hands where I can
home.
see them.
Daniel's jaw tightened. Elijah went on, voice low. He used to tell me, Elijah, the law is supposed to protect everyone. But knowing the law won't always protect you. The radio crackled again. Unit 12, results coming through. Daniel held up a hand, almost unconsciously, asking for a second more. Elijah gave a faint smile. You can put the cuffs away, officer. Daniel bristled. You don't know that. I do, Elijah said gently, because I've lived long enough to know when truth is about to arrive, and when it won't matter anymore. The words sat between them like a quiet accusation. Daniel turned back to the cruiser, pulling the door open. He stared at the screen as data loaded, name, license, records. Then another line appeared. Employer, State Supreme Court. Daniel froze. His mouth went dry. He scrolled. Position, Associate Justice. For a moment, the rain disappeared. The street disappeared. Even the sirens in the distance faded. All Daniel could hear was his own heartbeat. Loud, erratic, unforgiving. He looked back at Elijah. Elijah met his eyes. No triumph. No smirk. Just a quiet sadness, as if this confirmation brought him no relief at all. Daniel stepped out of the cruiser slowly. The power in his posture drained away, replaced by something smaller. Human.
I'm just passing through. What's the issue
He
here?
stopped.
This is a restricted
The apology
area. Hands where
caught
I
in
can
his
see them.
throat, tangled in years of habit and fear. I didn't know, he finally said. Elijah nodded once. I know. That hurt more than any rebuke. Daniel glanced down at the cuffs still in his hand. He clipped them back onto his belt, the sound sharp in the night. I'm sorry, he said again, this time softer. This stop, it shouldn't have gone this far. Elijah studied him, but it did. Yes, Daniel admitted. It did. They stood there, two men soaked by the same rain, divided by more than uniforms and titles. divided by experience.
This is a mistake.
Daniel felt
Sir, step away from
exposed,
the vehicle now.
ashamed.
I'm telling
He
you, I didn't
imagined
do
how
anything.
close he'd
Stop
come to
right there and
changing
state
this
your
man's
business.
night,
I'm just passing
maybe his
through. What's the
life.
issue here?
I
This is a
treat
restricted
everyone
area.
the same,
Hands where I can see them.
Daniel said, almost reflexively. Elijah tilted his head. No, he replied. You treat everyone the way you've been taught to fear them. The words were calm, not cruel, and that made them unbearable. Daniel opened his mouth to defend himself, to explain the calls, the training, the statistics, but nothing came out, because for the first time, the excuses sounded hollow even to him. I became a judge, Elijah said, because I believed the system could grow, that people inside it could change. He paused. Tonight tested that belief.
Officer, you have to
A lump
listen.
formed
This is a
in
mistake.
Daniel's
Sir,
throat.
step away from
The
the vehicle
radio
now.
buzzed again,
I'm telling you, I didn't
breaking
do
the
anything.
moment.
Stop
Unit
right there and
12,
state your business.
everything
I'm
checks
just
out.
passing through. What's the
You're
issue?
clear.
This is a restricted
Daniel
area.
exhaled
Hands where I can see
slowly.
them.
Understood. He turned off the cruiser lights. Red and blue faded into the wet pavement, leaving only the yellow glow of a street lamp above them. I won't write this up, Daniel said. No record. Elijah nodded. That's not justice, he said. That's mercy.
You need to
Daniel
step back
winced.
right now. I have
As
rights,
Elijah
officer.
moved
This is
toward his car,
unnecessary.
he stopped. Look back once.
Sir, you need to step
Officer
away from the
Mercer,
vehicle now.
he
I
said,
have
reading
every
the
right
name
to
on the
be here.
badge.
You can't do this.
I hope the next man you stop doesn't need to be a judge to be believed. Then he opened his door and drove away, taillights dissolving into the
Officer,
rain.
you have to listen.
Daniel
This is a
stood alone.
mistake. Sir,
The
step
street
away from
felt
the vehicle
different
now.
now,
I'm
quieter,
telling you, I didn't do
heavier.
anything.
Like it
Stop right there
remembered
and
what
state your
almost
business.
happened.
I'm just
He
passing through.
leaned
What's the
against the
issue
cruiser,
here? This is a
staring at
restricted area.
nothing.
Hands where I can
Have
see
you
them.
ever had someone help you, or spare you, when no one else would have? If yes, write yes in the comments and tell me their name. Sometimes gratitude deserves to be spoken, even years later. Daniel stayed there long after the rain slowed, replaying the moment again and again. Because some realizations don't come with sirens or shouts. They arrive softly and refuse to leave. Daniel didn't drive off right away. He sat in the cruiser with the engine running, hands resting on the steering wheel, knuckles pale. The windshield wipers moved back and forth in a slow, mechanical rhythm, smearing the last of the rain into dull streaks. Every pass felt like an eraser failing to remove what was already etched too deep. I hope the next man you stop doesn't need to be a judge to be believed. The words replayed again and again. Daniel shut off the engine. The silence was loud. He thought about the cuffs, how close they'd been to Elijah's wrists, how natural it had felt to reach for them, how trained, how automatic. That scared him more than the mistake itself. When he finally drove home, dawn was beginning to thin the darkness. The city looked softer at that hour, like it hadn't yet put on its armor. Daniel parked outside his small apartment building and sat there for a long moment before getting out. Inside, the place felt hollow. A half-empty coffee mug on the counter. A couch that still smelled faintly of last night's takeout. He dropped his keys into the bowl by the door and leaned back against the wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor in uniform. He closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he wondered when he'd stopped seeing faces and started seeing categories. Sleep didn't come easily. When it did, it was shallow, filled with flashes of rain, metal cuffs, and Elijah's calm eyes staring straight through him. 3 days later, Daniel sat in a mandatory departmental seminar room, arms crossed, listening to a speaker talk about community trust. He'd heard it all before. The buzzwords, the slides, the rehearsrsed empathy. But this time, something was different. When the speaker mentioned implicit bias, Daniel didn't scoff. He didn't tune out. His chest tightened instead. He remembered Elijah's voice. You treat everyone the way you've been taught to fear them. Daniel left early, claiming a headache. He didn't go home. Instead, he found himself driving downtown, past the courthouse, the same one Elijah had mentioned. The building rose tall and pale against the afternoon sky, all stone and authority. Daniel parked across the street and sat there, staring at the steps. He didn't know what he expected. Forgiveness? Closure? He saw people coming and going, lawyers with briefcases, clerks with coffee, citizens carrying folders that probably held their entire future inside. Then he saw Elijah. He was walking down the steps, coat pressed, posture straight, a leather briefcase in hand. From a distance, he looked powerful, untouchable. Up close, Daniel remembered. He was just a man who got tired in the rain. Before he could overthink it, Daniel stepped out of the car. Elijah Carter, he called, voice unsure. Elijah stopped, turned. Recognition flickered, then settled into something cautious. Officer Mercer, Elijah said. No hostility. No warmth. Just fact. I didn't come to apologize again, Daniel said quickly. I know that doesn't fix anything. Elijah studied him. Then why are you here? Daniel swallowed. Because I can't stop thinking about what you said, and because I realized I don't actually know how to do better. The honesty surprised even him. People passed by, unaware of the weight standing between the two men. Elijah gestured toward a nearby bench. Sit, he said. Not a command. An invitation. They sat. For years, Daniel said, staring at his hands, I told myself I was fair. That I treated everyone the same. That following procedure meant following justice. He laughed quietly. But procedure doesn't ask questions. It doesn't look people in the eye. Elijah nodded slowly. Procedure is easy, he said. Humanity is not. Daniel looked up. I almost took yours away. Elijah didn't deny it. Yes. The word landed like a verdict. I don't expect your forgiveness, Daniel continued. I don't want that moment to be the best version of me. Elijah leaned back, eyes lifting to the sky. Do you know how many men like you I've met? He asked. Daniel flinched. Too many. Yes, Elijah said. But also, not enough who come back. Daniel felt something loosen in his chest. Elijah turned to him. Change doesn't start with guilt. It starts with attention. With choosing to see the next person fully, even when fear tells you not to. Daniel nodded, absorbing every word like oxygen. They sat there a while longer. No speeches. No promises. Just two men sharing the uncomfortable space between who they were and who they might become. Before Elijah stood to leave, he said, if you truly want to do better, start small. Listen longer. Pause once more than you think you need to. Daniel stood too. I will. Elijah hesitated, then extended his hand. Daniel took it. The handshake was brief, firm, human. As Elijah walked away, Daniel stayed rooted, watching him disappear into the building. Now let me ask you something, and take a moment before you answer. What's one small good thing you've done recently, even if no one noticed? Share it in the comments. Someone reading might need that reminder tonight more than you think. That evening, Daniel went back on patrol. The city hadn't changed. But he had. Later that night, he pulled over a car for a broken taillight. The driver was young, nervous, hands shaking on the wheel. Daniel approached slowly. Not with suspicion. With patience. Hey, he said gently. You're okay. I just want to talk. The young man looked up, surprised. And in that quiet exchange, brief, ordinary, easily forgettable, something else began. Not redemption, but the work that comes before it. The young man's name was Marcus. Daniel learned it because he asked, not because he demanded it. Marcus sat in the driver's seat gripping the steering wheel, eyes darting between Daniel's badge and the rearview mirror like he expected something worse to arrive any second. The taillight really was broken. One glance confirmed it. But Daniel didn't reach for his ticket book. You heading home? Daniel asked. Marcus nodded quickly. Yes, sir. Just got off work. What do you do? I work nights at a warehouse, Marcus said. Overtime this week. Daniel glanced at the clock on the dash. Nearly midnight. He imagined the exhaustion, the long hours, the pressure, the quiet fear of getting pulled over and not knowing how it might end. Daniel stepped back, looked at the car again, then returned. Here's what we're going to do, he said calmly. I'm giving you a warning. Get that light fixed when you can. Drive safe. Marcus blinked. That's it. That's it. Relief washed over the young man's face so fast it almost hurt to watch. Thank you, he said. Really? Daniel nodded and stepped away, feeling something unfamiliar bloom in his chest. Not pride, not power. As Marcus drove off, Daniel stood there for a moment longer than necessary. The stop wouldn't make headlines. No report. No body cam clip. Just a quiet choice made differently. And that, he realized, mattered. Weeks passed. Daniel didn't become a new man overnight. He still felt the old instincts rise sometimes. The tension, the reflex to control. But now he noticed them. Questioned them. He listened more. He spoke less. Other officers noticed. "You've gone soft," one joked in the locker room. Daniel didn't argue. He just smiled faintly and kept tying his boots. One afternoon, he was reassigned to courthouse duty, routine security, mostly standing watch, checking bags. On his second day, he saw Elijah again. They didn't speak at first. Just a brief nod as Elijah passed through the metal detector. But something about being there, in that space of law and consequence, stirred Daniel. He began watching differently. He noticed how people arrived nervous, shoulders tight, clutching paperwork like lifelines. He noticed how a kind word from a clerk eased someone's shaking hands. How a judge's tone could either crush or steady a person's spirit. And he noticed how often dignity was the first thing stripped away. One morning, an elderly woman was stopped at the entrance. Her bag set off the detector. She grew flustered, apologizing again and again, voice trembling. "It's just my medicine," she said. I don't want to be late." Daniel stepped forward before anyone else could escalate it. "It's okay," he said gently. "Take your time." He helped her sort through the bag. Pills. Paperwork. A folded photo of a young man in a graduation gown. "My grandson," she said softly when she noticed Daniel looking. "He'd be proud I showed up today." "For what?" Daniel asked. "For testifying," she replied. "I'm scared." Daniel smiled at her. "Then you're brave." Her eyes filled with tears, not from fear this time, but from being seen. She passed through without another word. Daniel stood there afterward, heart full and heavy all at once. "Now it's your turn." Pause for a moment. "What's one small act of kindness you've done recently, even if no one thanked you for it? Write it in the comments. Your words might remind someone scrolling tonight that goodness still exists." That afternoon, Daniel received a message from his supervisor. "See me." He walked into the office expecting a complaint. Instead, the captain leaned back in his chair, hands folded. "I've had a few notes come across my desk," he said. "Community feedback." Daniel's stomach tightened. "People are saying you listen," the captain continued. "That you de-escalate. That you treat them like humans." Daniel blinked. Is that a problem?" The captain almost smiled. "No," he said. "It's a reminder." He slid a folder across the desk. "We're starting a pilot program. Voluntary. Community outreach, conflict mediation training. I want you on it." Daniel stared at the folder like it might disappear. "Me?" he asked. "You," the captain said. "Seems like you've been paying attention." Daniel nodded slowly. "I'll do it." That night, he sat alone in his apartment, folder open on the table, the city humming outside his window. He thought of Elijah, of Marcus, of the woman at the courthouse. He thought of the man he'd almost been that night in the rain, and the man he still had time to become. Change, he realized, wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself with apologies or speeches. It showed up quietly, in moments no one filmed, choices no one applauded. But somewhere deep inside, Daniel felt it settling, not as redemption, but as responsibility. And for the first time, he didn't turn away from it. The letter arrived on a Thursday morning. Daniel almost threw it away. It was slipped under his apartment door with the rest of the building's mail, a plain white envelope with no return address, his name typed neatly on the front. He assumed it was another utility notice or some forgotten subscription reminder. But something made him pause. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Officer Mercer? You don't know me, but you helped my son 3 weeks ago. Broken taillight. Late shift. He came home that night lighter than I've seen him in years. He said you looked at him like he mattered. I just wanted you to know, that moment mattered to us." Daniel sat down slowly, the paper trembling slightly in his hands. He read it twice. Then a third time. No badge number mentioned. No formal complaint or praise. Just a mother's handwriting at the bottom, slightly uneven, like she hadn't written many letters lately. Thank you. Daniel leaned back against the wall, eyes burning. He thought of all the reports he'd filed over the years, all the paperwork that documented mistakes, crimes, outcomes. None of them had ever felt like this. This felt heavier and warmer. A week later, the pilot program began. Daniel sat in a small community center room with folding chairs and a circle of officers, some skeptical, some curious, some clearly annoyed. At the front stood a mediator, a woman named Grace, calm and sharp-eyed. "This isn't about being perfect," she said. "It's about being present." They practiced listening. Real listening. Not waiting to respond. Not planning the next command. At first, it felt awkward. Exposed. Then it felt necessary. During a break, Daniel noticed Elijah standing near the doorway, speaking quietly with Grace. He hadn't expected to see him here. Elijah noticed Daniel too. A brief smile crossed his face, restrained, but genuine. "You're here," Elijah said as Daniel approached. "I could say the same," Daniel replied. "I consult on these programs," Elijah said. "Policy meets reality." Daniel nodded. "Then you're the reason I'm here." Elijah studied him for a moment. "No," he said. "You are." Before Daniel could respond, Grace called the group back together. They broke into pairs. Daniel found himself sitting across from a woman named Ava, a local teacher invited to speak about her experiences with law enforcement in her neighborhood. She didn't hold back. She talked about fear. About explaining to her students how to behave during a stop. About watching children learn caution before they learned confidence. Daniel listened. Not to fix it. Not to defend himself. Just to listen. When Ava finished, her voice cracked. She looked down embarrassed. Daniel spoke quietly. "Thank you for trusting us with that." Ava looked up, surprised. Then nodded. Something shifted in the room. That evening, a story began circulating online. A short clip. Grainy. Shot from a distance. A police stop in the rain. Someone had filmed it from a nearby building. The lights, the tension, the moment when the cuffs hovered, then stopped. The caption read, "This could have gone so wrong." It didn't. Comments poured in. Anger. Relief. Debate. Then someone identified Elijah. A Supreme Court judge. The story spread fast. News outlets picked it up by morning. Daniel watched it unfold on his phone, his stomach twisting tighter with every headline. He hadn't expected this. Hadn't wanted it. By noon, he was called into the captain's office again. "You didn't tell me the man you stopped was a judge," the captain said. "I didn't know until the end," Daniel replied. "And I didn't think it mattered after." The captain studied him. "Public reactions mixed," he said. "Some are calling you a hero. Others are asking why it took a title to stop an arrest." Daniel swallowed. "They're right." The captain raised an eyebrow. Daniel met his gaze. "It shouldn't have taken that." Silence stretched. Then the captain sighed. "You're going to be asked to speak," he said. "About the program. About the stop." Daniel's heart pounded. "Me?" "You," the captain said. "And Judge Carter." The auditorium was packed. Community members. Officers. Reporters. Daniel stood backstage, palms damp, breathing slow. Elijah stood beside him, calm as ever. "Funny," Daniel said quietly. "I've faced worse situations with less fear." Elijah smiled faintly. "This requires honesty," he said. "That's harder than courage." They were called out together. Under the lights, Daniel felt exposed, not as an officer, but as a man. He told the truth. He spoke about training. About fear. About the night in the rain and how close he came to being someone he didn't want to be. He didn't excuse it. He owned it. Then Elijah spoke. About dignity, about systems, about the cost of being constantly doubted. The room was silent. Not angry. Listening. If that moment hit you right here, in the chest, leave a red heart in the comments. Some truths don't need words. They just need to be felt. When it was over, there was no applause at first. Just quiet. Then one person stood. Then another. Until the room rose together. Not in celebration, but in recognition. Daniel felt his throat tighten. For the first time, The weight he carried didn't feel like punishment. It felt like purpose. And the story wasn't over yet. The applause faded slowly, like a tide pulling back from shore. Daniel stood there under the lights, heart still racing, ears ringing, not from noise, but from everything he'd said out loud for the first time. He hadn't planned on being so honest. It just happened. Like once the door opened, there was no way to stop what needed to come out. Backstage, the hallway felt narrow and quiet. The hum of voices from the auditorium softened into a distant murmur. Daniel leaned against the wall, exhaling. Elijah stood a few feet away, loosening his tie. "You didn't protect yourself," Elijah said calmly. Daniel looked up. "I didn't want to." Elijah nodded. "That's rare." Before Daniel could respond, a woman approached them, mid-50s, tired eyes, clutching her purse like it was the last solid thing in the world. "My name is Ruth," she said, voice trembling. "My son, he didn't make it through a stop like that." The air shifted. Daniel straightened instinctively, then stopped himself. He didn't reach for words. He didn't reach for defense. "I'm sorry," he said softly. Ruth looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes weren't angry. They were exhausted. "I came tonight ready to hate you," she admitted. "Ready to walk out." Daniel swallowed. "But I stayed," she continued. "Because for once, someone said the quiet part out loud." She turned to Elijah. "Thank you for surviving long enough to say it." Then back to Daniel. "And thank you for not pretending." She walked away before either man could speak. Daniel felt his knees weaken. Elijah placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "This is the part no one warns you about," he said. "When doing better hurts more than doing nothing ever did." Outside, night had fallen again. The city lights glowed warm against the dark, unaware of the reckoning happening inside a few human hearts. Daniel and Elijah stepped into the cool air together. "I keep wondering," Daniel said after a moment, "if I deserve to be here." Elijah didn't answer right away. Instead, he asked, "Do you think the question is whether you deserve it, or whether you'll honor it?" Daniel looked down at the pavement. "I almost ruined someone's life," he said. "And the only reason I didn't was luck." Elijah stopped walking. Turned to him. "No," he said firmly. "You stopped because something in you hesitated. That matters." Daniel shook his head. "It shouldn't have taken your title." Elijah's voice softened. "No, it shouldn't have." They stood there in silence, traffic passing behind them like time refusing to pause. Then Elijah said something Daniel hadn't expected. "I forgive you." Daniel looked up sharply. "You don't have to." "I know," Elijah replied. "But forgiveness isn't about erasing harm. It's about refusing to let harm be the final word." Daniel felt his chest cave inward. Tears pressed hard behind his eyes. "Be honest," Elijah continued. "Could you forgive yourself if the roles were reversed?" Daniel didn't answer. Because he didn't know. "And now I want to ask you, honestly, without judgment. If you were in Daniel's place, could you forgive after coming that close to causing irreversible harm? Type forgive, if you could. Or never, if that wound would be too deep. Both answers are human. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He sat at his kitchen table until dawn, the letter from Marcus's mother folded beside him, Ruth's face replaying in his mind. Forgiveness felt heavier than guilt somehow, like a responsibility he wasn't sure he could carry. By morning, he made a decision. He requested a temporary leave from patrol. Instead, he volunteered full-time for the outreach program. No sirens. No cruiser. Just rooms like this, community centers, school gyms, church basements, where stories were shared instead of commands. Some days were brutal. People yelled. Walked out. Others stayed. One afternoon, Daniel spoke to a room full of teenagers. He didn't wear his uniform. Just jeans and a jacket. "I won't lie to you," he said. "I've made mistakes that keep me up at night." A hand shot up. A boy with crossed arms and hard eyes. "Then why should we trust you?" Daniel nodded slowly. "You shouldn't," he said. "Not right away." The room stilled. "But you can watch what I do next," he added. "And decide for yourself." The boy studied him. then leaned back. That was enough for now. Weeks later, Daniel ran into Marcus again, at a grocery store checkout. Marcus recognized him instantly. "You were serious," Marcus said, glancing at the outreach flyer in Daniel's hand. "I'm trying to be," Daniel replied. Marcus smiled. "My mom still talks about you." Daniel laughed quietly. "Her? Thank you." As Marcus walked away, Daniel felt something settle. Not absolution. Not closure. But a path. One that demanded effort every single day. And for the first time, he didn't resent that. Because redemption, he was learning, wasn't a moment. It was a practice. And the hardest part was still ahead. The hardest test came quietly. No cameras. No audience. No applause waiting at the end. It came on a cold Tuesday evening in a community center gym that smelled faintly of dust and old basketballs. Folding chairs were set in uneven rows. Only a dozen people showed up, fewer than expected. Daniel stood at the front, hands loosely clasped, heart steady but alert. He'd learned not to underestimate moments like this. Halfway through the session, a man in the back stood up. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his voice rough around the edges. "My brother's name was Thomas," he said. He didn't walk away from his stop. The room went silent. Daniel felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the instinct to brace, to shield himself. He didn't. "I don't want your apology," the man continued. "I've heard plenty. I want to know why people like you always say you'll change after." Daniel nodded slowly. "Because before feels invisible," he said. "And after feels unavoidable." The man stared at him. "So what makes this different?" Daniel didn't answer right away. He stepped down from the front and stood level with the man. Not close. Not distant. "Nothing," Daniel said. "Except that I'm still here. And I'll be here tomorrow. And the day after that." The man searched his face, looking for something false. He didn't find it. The man sat back down. The meeting ended without resolution. No hugs. No forgiveness. Just quiet nods as people filed out into the night. Daniel stayed behind, stacking chairs alone. Grace approached him. "That was hard," she said. "Yes," Daniel replied. "And necessary." Outside, the air was sharp and clean. Daniel took a deep breath, watching it fog in front of him. He thought of Elijah's words. Honor it. This was what honoring looked like. Months passed. The outreach program grew. Slowly. Unevenly. Some officers joined. Others mocked it. Daniel stopped trying to convince them. He focused on showing up. One evening he received a message from Elijah. Coffee? They met at a small cafe near the courthouse. No suits. No uniforms. Just two men at a corner table, steam rising from their cups. "You look different," Elijah said. Daniel smiled faintly. "I feel different." Elijah studied him. "Heavier." "Yes," Daniel admitted. "But clearer." Elijah nodded. "That's the cost." They talked about cases. About policies inching forward. About resistance. Then Elijah said, "There's something I need you to know." Daniel looked up. "That night," Elijah continued, "I went home and sat in my car for a long time before going inside." Daniel's chest tightened. "I kept thinking," Elijah said, "about how close I came to being another story people whispered about instead of learned from." He met Daniel's eyes. "You didn't just stop that night. You changed the direction of it." Daniel swallowed. "I almost didn't." "But you did," Elijah said. "And then you stayed." They sat in silence, coffee cooling between them. Outside, a group of teenagers laughed as they passed the window, careless and alive. Daniel watched them. "I want a world where they don't have to learn fear first." Elijah smiled. "Then keep building it." The following spring, Daniel returned to patrol part-time. Same streets. Same city. Different man. During one stop, a woman began to cry before he even spoke. Daniel took a step back, hands visible. "You're not in trouble," he said gently. "Take a breath." She did. Later, she thanked him, not for letting her go, but for letting her feel safe. Daniel drove away slowly, chest warm. Change was spreading. Not fast enough. Never fast enough. But it was spreading. One night, as Daniel walked back to his car after another community meeting, he noticed a message written in chalk on the sidewalk. Thank you for listening. No name. No date. Just that. Daniel stood there for a long time. If you still believe that love can win, even after everything, write Amen in the comments. Let's leave a trail of hope here. Someone passing through might need to see it tonight. Daniel looked up at the sky, stars faint behind the city glow. For the first time since that night in the rain, he felt something close to peace. Not because the past was erased, but because the future was no longer avoided. And somewhere ahead, not promised, but possible, was a world just a little kinder than the one he'd inherited. He got into his car and drove on, toward whatever came next. The rain returned almost a year later. Not the violent kind, just a steady, quiet drizzle that softened the edges of the city and made the streetlights glow like memory. Daniel stood under an awning outside the courthouse, collar turned up, watching people hurry past with heads down and shoulders tight. Some habits never changed. Others did. Inside the building, a small ceremony had just ended. No cameras. No speeches worth quoting. Just a modest acknowledgement of a program that had started small and grown. Imperfect, uneven, but real. Daniel held a folded pamphlet in his hand. Community Listening Initiative, 1-year review. He hadn't expected to feel emotional about it. Yet there it was, sitting heavy in his chest. Elijah stepped out beside him, coat buttoned, expression thoughtful. Funny, Elijah said. How much can change without the world noticing? Daniel nodded. And how much stays the same? They stood together, watching a young couple argue quietly near the steps, then laugh and pull each other closer as they walked away. Life, continuing. You know, Daniel said, sometimes I still replay that night. Elijah glanced at him. Which part? The pause, Daniel replied. The second before everything could have gone wrong. Elijah was quiet for a moment. That pause saved us both, he said. You just didn't know it yet. Daniel exhaled slowly. A few feet away, a boy, maybe 10 years old, tugged at his mother's sleeve, pointing curiously at Daniel's badge. Is he a cop? The boy whispered, not very quietly. The mother stiffened, instinctively pulling her son closer. Daniel felt the old ache stir, familiar, unwelcome. But instead of turning away, he crouched slightly, meeting the boy's eye level. Yes, Daniel said gently. I am. The boy studied him. Are you nice? The mother froze. Daniel smiled, not wide, not forced. Just honest. I try to be, he said. The boy nodded, satisfied. Okay. They walked off. Daniel stayed crouched a second longer than necessary, blinking against the rain. Elijah watched him with something like pride, and something like relief. Later that night, Daniel returned home and opened a drawer he hadn't touched in months. Inside were small things, reminders he kept not to punish himself, but to remember. Marcus's mother's letter. A folded outreach flyer from the first meeting. A scrap of paper with a single word written on it, handed to him by Ruth after another session weeks later. Continue. Daniel held it between his fingers. He thought about the version of himself who stood in the rain with cuffs in hand, convinced he was doing his job, blind to the cost. He thought about Elijah, tired but dignified, refusing to disappear. He thought about Marcus, the boy on the courthouse steps, the chalk message on the sidewalk. None of it erased the past. But all of it answered it. Daniel sat at the table and began to write. Not a report, not a statement, but a letter. One he didn't know who it was for yet. He wrote about fear. About training. About the lie that power equals safety. And about the truth he learned too late. That humanity is not a weakness, but a discipline. When he finished, the sky outside was beginning to lighten. Weeks later, Daniel received a message from Grace. Someone wants to meet you. Nervous. Reminds me of you, a year ago. They met at the same community center gym. The young man sat across from Daniel, hands clasped tight. I want to be a cop, he said. But I don't want to hurt anyone. Daniel leaned forward slightly. Then you need to learn to pause, he said. To listen. To question yourself as hard as you question others. The young man nodded, eyes bright. Daniel handed him the scrap of paper Ruth had given him. Continue. The young man looked up. What does it mean? It means, Daniel said, you don't quit being human when it gets uncomfortable. That evening, Daniel walked home as the sun dipped low, painting the buildings gold. The city felt loud and alive, flawed, unfinished. Just like him. If this story stayed with you, if it made you feel something you didn't expect, don't scroll past quietly. Tap like, not for applause, but for the man who stood in the rain, doubted himself, and chose to pause instead of destroy. That single click can be your way of saying, I saw you, and I believe change is possible. Daniel reached his door and paused, hand on the knob. For a moment he listened to the city breathe. Then he stepped inside, carrying the past with him, but no longer letting it lead. Because some stories don't end with forgiveness or justice or applause. They end with a choice. To keep going. And that choice, made again and again, is where hope lives.